Just going back to the leadership conferences, I think in all with Stoneleigh, with the Brighton Leadership Conference, one can remember particular speakers, particular messages and so on. I suppose one that stands out high would be Simon Pettit, 1998.
Yeah.
When he preached on, "It is an apostolic mandate to remember the poor," quoting that passage from Galatians 2:10, where Paul is writing to Galatians and saying he's got, as it were, the apostolic permission to reach out to the Gentiles, but don't forget the poor. The very thing that I wanted to do anyhow, Paul says. And I remember at the end of that message, there was that sense of awe.
Yeah.
God has spoken. It wasn't just a very good sermon. It was God's commission, wasn't it? Do you remember that, and how we then got together as a team a month or two later and said, what does this mean? How do we interpret it? And then it went to Stoneleigh and raised a phenomenal offering to give to the poor the following year. So that in the year, the millennium year, 2000, we could reach out in many, many ways. It was an extraordinary message, that, wasn't it? It's one of the kind of highs, I think, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, no question. I think that it was interesting. I would have said, prior to Simon's message, there were good works happening, but they were kind of incidental. You wouldn't have said that's one of the themes of New Frontiers. I always used to commend Roger Forster and Ichthus because of their social conscience and the things they did. I didn't think it was a big thing for us. Simon, I think, being in Cape Town, that kind of face-to-face wealth and poverty highlighted the reality of it to him. And he came with that burning message. I mean, it was a stunning sermon. I remember myself just standing and applauding at the end, and many stood and applauded. And I thank God so much that it wasn't just, well done and good, you know, we thought, what are we going to do? And I remember you and I think Penny Ralph, we established this Jubilee program to take us up so that by the end of the millennium, every church would aim to have its outreach to the poor. And I remember you particularly took it under your wing, and Penny with you. We had this, I think we called it a Jubilee project.
Yes, I think actually what happened, I think we asked Penny to head up what came to be known as Act 2000, but for the millennium year, which was essentially in the UK. And then subsequently, it was in 2000, March the 23rd, I can be very precise. I was in Guinea in West Africa, and God woke me up in the middle of the night and spoke to me very clearly, out of which then the Act Together initiative came about, with the same ethos, every church be involved. But I felt God was talking to me more about outside the UK than within. So we now had, as it were, established something within the UK. But of course, in many of the nations we were working into, you couldn't do anything but remember the poor. There was the very context in which they were working. And at that point, I felt God commissioned me to go and get alongside churches. I mean, I was a learner more than a giver, but to try and raise the bar, and subsequently wrote a book, or short book, The Poor Deserve the Best. And that's my heart, I believe. You know, they shouldn't just have the dregs that you throw away. Let's honour the poor and see what we can do to not only just lift them out of their immediate poverty, but equip them going forward.
I think that whole message of not just helping, but releasing them to become pillars, oaks of righteousness. It was a prophetic word that came through that. And I thought you carried that so much. And Edward Berea and some of these guys, it's not just handouts, but teaching them to start little businesses and much more. I think you can hand out and do badly. I mean, you've learned this more than any of us, I'm sure. But I think God's taught us a lot of things. So at the beginning, you blunder in to try and help. But I think learning to help people makes, I mean, people like Scott Marks in Zimbabwe, Mozambique is unbelievable. And what Edward does in Kenya, you know, I think people are learning how to stimulate people to, hey, we could do this. We're not just looking for handouts, but we could do this. It's so much more wonderful. So you're releasing them in their psychology as well as putting bread on the table.
Yes, I mean, you're mentioning Scott. You know, as we record this, we're in the middle of the COVID crisis.
Yeah.
And just to see the way that he is determined not just to hand out food, but to empower young people who are living in abject poverty to become productive and have their own little businesses. Amazing, quite remarkable.
No, we've got some amazing people in our ranks. I am overwhelmed. I love on a Sunday going around now during this COVID season and dropping in Zimbabwe at Harare and going in at Cape Town and popping in because they're all doing their live programs. I think, these people are so wonderful. And we're massively privileged to know some incredible people who are serving God as part of the New Frontiers family all over the world.
So going back to Stoneleigh, we had 11 years there, and then I think once again God broke in on us, didn't he? We were starting to negotiate the next season of renting that showground. And I remember going to the authorities and they said, well, we're not sure where they're going to go on having it. And I thought, well, of course, we must be here, you know.
I remember it well.
And we wrested from them the power to make the decision ourselves rather than them imposing it.
Well, what happened was extraordinary, like exactly as you said, that it was they who initially said, well, the 10 years you've had, you've completed it. And it's like, that's the end. And I remember that message was delivered to me. I thought, what? The end of Stoneleigh? And we had a team meeting coming up. And I think it was the UK one first. And I thought, well, I don't want to say this at the beginning of the team meeting because it will dominate our 3 days together. And so I said nothing. And then we began to pray and worship together, and prophecies came that were quite extraordinary about moving on. I can't remember the detail, but it was quite distinct. Time of a new day, moving on. I thought, this is strange. So in the end, I said, well, you just need to know about this. And we talked about it, obviously prayed around it and felt, well, they've closed the door. That's the end of it. And God's owning this before we even shared it. God spoke. And on my way home in the car, had a phone call from Kevin Rose, who had been back up and negotiated. And they said, oh, it's okay. Okay, there were 1 or 2 things we wanted to settle. They're settled. You can carry on. I thought, oh, no, God's just spoken to us that we don't. Now they're saying we can. So I remember it being a huge dilemma. And very soon afterwards, we had our international team meeting. And I thought, I'm not going to say anything at the team meeting that when we brought guys in from around. And they hadn't been able to hear about it. It was very recent. We hadn't shared. And so again, we started together, and amazingly, prophecies came about time to move on, start. Things were closing, things were opening. I thought, I can't believe. So in the end, it was, as you said, our decision under God, time to close. And the funny thing, I mean, people couldn't believe you're closing Stoneleigh. I remember the people from Spring Harvest came to my office and they said, can we come and see you? Yeah, they came, they said, we hear you're closing Stoneleigh. We've come, we want to hear it from the horse's mouth. Is that true? And I said, yeah. They said, what? And I thought, well, Spring Harvest is something you do, or something you are. But I said, Stoneleigh is something we do. It's not who we are. We do Stoneleigh. Anyway, God.
It was a vehicle for something else, wasn't it? And it was time to get off.
No, God spoke so plainly. And then we had this wonderful prophetic vision. We'd done all the artwork because we had these wonderful magazines. Adrian Willard was just brilliant at producing material. And we got our artwork all ready to go for Stoneleigh. And then had this amazing word about Guy Miller saw a vision of a yellow field. You know, in the UK, you see these yellow fields, and they're usually rapeseed. Rapeseed, yeah.
It's oilseed rape.
And they stand up. And he said, I see this vision, it's a yellow field, and we're all familiar with that. He said, as I looked at it, it's changing from yellow, it's going grey. And then I looked closer, it's not rapeseed, it's dandelions. And they're changing from that yellow to grey, and now the wind's blowing, and it's going everywhere. And it's like, oh. So we changed our artwork, and the magazine, everything had the wonderful image on it of the seed blowing, and that's exactly what happened.
And then on that final wonderful celebration night, big letters, go, I remember being paraded around.
Right.
And so it was a commissioning, wasn't it, into the next phase. Part of that next phase, Simon Pettit headed up 2 initiatives on 2 years under the same title, Together for the Future, where he gathered us as apostolic teams from around the world for a week to 10 days. And it was kind of to get fresh strategy, wasn't it, in particular areas. Can you remember some of those? Mission into new nations?
Yeah, we had what we called task teams. Do you remember?
Task teams, that's right.
Because we gathered as an international team, and there were such huge subjects to talk about, and it was very hard for every subject to reach its conclusion. And so we felt what we need is to, from within the team, create sub-teams, task teams, about evangelism, about the poor, about this and that. I've forgotten all the various themes, but there are a number of themes. And we asked someone...
Church planting, of course.
Yeah. We asked someone to head up that team and to gather that little team. And we gave them authority that if they reached a conclusion, that is what we would do. It wouldn't need the whole team to be present. You go for it, you plan it, we give you permission, take authority. And it was great. I remember the evangelism one with Lex, and they started that thing called Front Edge, I think it was called.
Oh, yeah.
Was it called Front Edge? I believe it was.
Yes, I think it was.
It was a terrific evangelistic push. And different things came out from those task teams, as you were saying.
Yeah, Colin Barron with church planting.
Yeah.
Fresh initiatives, church planting around the world. It wasn't just UK by any means.
No, it really gave us a leap forward. It was quite a great breakthrough, actually.
I'm hugely influential, I think, in the last 20 years. Dave Devenish, of course, with From the Nations to the Nations, that sense that until then, there had to have been a bit of a feel of from the UK to the world. And I think he changed the feel there, didn't he? No, from this nation to that nation. And I remember Sampo from the States going and living in Zimbabwe for a time, didn't he? And developing a whole chronological Bible story and way of evangelizing.
Andrei Bondarenko from Ukraine to India.
So it really was effective. And of course, again, something close to my heart, Simon Pettit was asked to head up One for the Poor, Remember the Poor. And sadly, we met only once before he died with a heart attack in January 2005.
Yeah, that's sad.
Something like
that.
But then Steve Oliver picked up the battle and ran with it, resulting in books and I think a lot of good ministry amongst the poor.
Yeah, no question.
And still.